Hello and welcome to this tech tip provided by Imaginet Technologies. My name is Rusty Belcher and I'm going to be working through this tech tip with you today. In this tech tip we're going to be looking at the Factory Design Suite and the process for making unique modifications to factory assets. Very often factory design users run into a typical issue. They want to make a unique modification to a factory asset. Now in our example, I want to start off by dropping in a simple asset. I'm going to go to my System Assets and then the Architectural folder. I'm going to go to the Structural category and I want to bring in a simple wall. I'm going to drop this off on the layout on the floor, and I want to talk about the way assets work in the Factory Design Suite. When you create an asset with the Factory Design Suite, it actually spawns a unique part based on settings that you make for the asset in the Factory Properties window. Now, the asset is actually protected. If I right-click on this asset for a minute, I'm going to go to the properties of it. And I want to take a look at the name of the asset. You get a unique name every time you drop in an asset. It gives it a unique name, and it saves it in a preset directory called Factory Assets. Now this directory is handled as a library folder, and simply put, you cannot make modifications to the asset if it's stored in this folder. So with a wall, it's not unreasonable to think that a user would want to carve out a door opening or a window opening. Well, let's see what happens when you try that with a typical asset. I'm going to use Inventor or standard Inventor functionality for this. I'm going to double click the component. I'll select Create Sketch and pick a face, and when I do, I get a warning that says, hey, this is a read-only part. And it's read-only because it's stored in that library folder. So I'm going to cancel out of this and click Return. So what are users to do if they want to make a default change to a typical asset? Well, there's a couple of workflows that are open to you that allow you to make changes to the asset. And I want to focus on one of them, I think the template method first. I'm going to double click this asset. Just going to open it up right here. And in this workflow, I'm going to create a part template from this asset. To do that, we can use it just as it is. We don't need to make any modifications to it. We can go over here to the application icon under Save As, and we'll select Save Copy as Template. Now I have a folder here called Factory Assets, and I've simply saved this part in this folder called Wall Unique. Now I'm not going to resave it, I'll just hit Return. Now to utilize that template, we are going to use a typical Inventor workflow. I'm going to go to the Assemble command and I'm going to select Create. I'm going to call this My Wall. And then for the template selection, I'm going to go to my Factory Asset category and select the asset that we created. I'll click OK, and I simply click in the background to drop off the new component. Now if I click Return, I can drag the asset around just like you'd expect any other factory asset. But in this workflow, I can use the typical Inventor process of double-clicking the component to make modifications. I can select Create Sketch, sketch on the face, and then I could create any openings in the wall that I want. We'll just go ahead and extrude these two, cutting through all. Now it is important to realize the difference between this component, which is a unique typical Inventor component, and this component, which is a factory asset. This one is protected and stored in the asset directory. This one is a common component stored in your workspace. I've heard this issue described in a number of ways, and one of the more common methods that people refer to this issue to me is that, Rusty, I'd like to cut a hole through a conveyor. How do I do that? So let's talk about conveyors for a minute, and I want to talk about another potential way to accomplish the same goal. I'm going to go back up to my system assets, and I'm going to go into the conveyor folder. And I'm just going to bring in a couple of conveyors here. I'm going to bring in a straight belt conveyor. We'll just drop this off. I'll put another one here, and we'll grab a couple of curved conveyors as well. Now we're just using the typical factory design suite process that we're all used to. But let's say at this particular juncture you want to make a custom modification to one of the assets. Again, if you use the conventional Inventor practice to go in and create a sketch on the part, you're going to see that it's read-only. So what do we do if we have an existing asset that we need to make a modification to? Well, I'm going to go to the Assembly tab, and over here on the Productivity panel, we're going to use one of the productivity tools called Save and Replace Component. I'll start the command and I'll select the component that I want to be, or that I want to make the unique modification to. Now I'm going to save it in my workspace and I'm going to call it My Conveyor. I've already got one, so I'll just replace it. Now, it almost looks like nothing happens. As a matter of fact, the browser stays exactly the same. You're not going to see the word My Conveyor show up by default. However, if I right-click on the conveyor and go to Properties, you will see that it has substituted the new part for the original part. And what this simply means is that I can start to treat it just like a regular Inventor component. If I double-click it, I can come in and create a sketch on it. And if I wanted to, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I could cut a hole right through a conveyor. I'll click Return and go back to the assembly. Again, let me reiterate the point here that the rest of these assets are typical Factory Design Suite assets stored in the Factory Asset folder. This is now a common part that is stored in your workspace. Now this is going to bring us to the end of this tech tip. I hope you learned something from the tech tip, and if you've ever needed to make a custom modification to a factory asset, I hope you find this process helpful. If you'd like to look at additional tech tips, please review the tech tips available at imagineit.com.